Hello, Saints and Patriots. Apostle Claver T. Kamal Imani from RagingElePhantsRadio.com, the rebellious voice of Texas Liberty, welcoming you to another session of the Legislative Action Workshop sponsored by the Texas Nationalist Movement. Tonight's special guest is Rachel Malone, Gun Owners of America Texas Chapter's Executive Director. She has a fantastic presentation for us. Before we get to Rachel and say hello to her, just want to remind you a couple of things. First, at the bottom of your screen in the conference room, you will see a Q&A button. And during Rachel's presentation tonight, we'll be monitoring that window for any questions that you have as a workshop attendee. There's also a chat room button there as well. We'll be monitoring that, but that's also a fantastic way to interact with the other attendees of Rachel's presentation tonight. We still have a couple of more sessions left in this Legislative Action Workshop. Tomorrow is going to be the last regularly scheduled day in the series, but then we do have other conversations coming up, and they're listed at tnm.me/TNMLaw, TNMLAW for Legislative Action Workshop. And you should know the process by now. You have to sign up for each individual session because an unique URL link is created for each conversation, like it was with Rachel tonight. So if you want to get on the conversation tomorrow with Teresa Beckmeyer, talking about the Freedom Caucus and what they'd like to get done in 2019, or right after the first of the year, the conversation with Jonathan Stickland, then you need to go to tnm.me/TNMLaw and reserve your seat for those conversations. If you missed any of the previous sessions of the Legislative Action Workshop, fear not, just go to the website, tnm.me/TNMLaw, and all the videos are posted there. Feel free to share those. And there hasn't been not a single session that has disappointed, chock full of factoids, encouragement, edification in each and every one of them, perfect for the 2019 legislative session and beyond. We'd encourage you to go there and look at those videos if you missed any of the sessions, and feel free to share them. With that in mind, Rachel Malone, Gun Owners of America, the Texas chapter, which means it has to be absolutely the best chapter. But then again, Rachel has been known for her activism even before that, had a brief stint on staff at the Republican Party of Texas, but certainly a rising star when it comes to liberty activism and Second Amendment rights. And she certainly seems to be a perfect fit at Gun Owners of America, with a lot of experience under the Pink Dome. And that's what we want to talk about tonight. Her experience under the Pink Dome, the wisdom that she's been able to harvest over the several sessions she's worked there, and how important it is to get in front of committees and let your voice be heard. Rachel, how are you tonight?
I am doing fabulous, Claver. How are you doing?
Great, great. A friend of Raging Elephants Radio's, of course, and but you've been traveling all over the state, and perhaps we can get some more exposure for you, save you some gas mileage with this digital presentation that you're going to do for us tonight. Why don't you have at it, and I'll yield the floor.
Well, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Yes, definitely a lot easier to set up shop right here in my home rather than driving, but glad to have the reach all over the state. So glad to be here, and thank you for those who are listening. So I've got a question for you, and just to start this off, I'm going to be asking a number of questions. Whenever you can, just put your answers up in that Q&A window. Would love to hear some feedback from you as I go, and definitely please enter your questions. I will be having plenty of time for Q&A as I go. So my first question for you that I want you to think about is, what are the issues that you care the most about? And I'm sure if you're here listening, there are things that you would like to happen in the legislature. Maybe it's some form of limited government or liberty. For me, obviously, I'm working on gun rights. So constitutional carry, getting rid of gun-free zones, making sure we don't have ensuring that we don't have gun control passed here in Texas, which is a very real threat. So those are things I'm working on. But I get all sorts of answers like, lower taxes, or life issues, or property rights, whatever other liberty issues and rights there are. Think of the one thing that you care the most about. And as I'm going through the presentation tonight, try to think of how you will apply activism on that issue to the process that I'm talking about. And I'm going to ask you another question. Have you ever tried to talk to your legislators about this issue? Have you ever tried to make your opinion known? Okay, for a lot of you, probably yes, you made some type of phone call or email at least at some time if you haven't actually had a meeting. Or you've done some type of activism to try to create change here. Got another question for you. When you speak up and make those phone calls, do you feel like your voice is always being heard? And anytime you call your legislator and you ask them for something, they just go and do the thing? And usually if I'm giving a live training, this is where everybody starts laughing, because the answer is no. You feel a little more like you're yelling into the wind. You don't feel like you are actually being heard. And so what I would like to do is walk you through the process, the legislative process, so you can be more effective with less effort. And to me, it's like you're standing on a stage trying to talk to a huge group and you're yelling and nobody hears you, but then you take a few steps over, you talk into the microphone, suddenly everybody can hear you and you're not losing your voice anymore. It's so much less effort. That is what it's like to know the process. You can get more done with less time and less energy. So my breakthrough in this happened starting in 2011. I became aware that year of the licensed open carry bill that was moving through the legislature. And I figured all the political people, the people who do this stuff, that's their job. So of course they'll make sure it happens, right? Because I'm not a political person. I don't do this stuff. I don't want to do this stuff. I don't want to do politics, and I'm not cut out for politics. So definitely everybody else will just make sure it happens, right? Well, as it turned out, the bill died. And I realized that, I had to do something, and getting involved like I did about an hour before the session ended was not enough. So I decided I was going to get involved. I was going to do something in 2013. So here in Texas, make a note of this. You only have a session every other year. It's 5 months, all the odd years. So January through May, and we'll talk about that later. So if something dies one year, you got to wait a couple years before it can be introduced and have a chance again. So 2013, I came back. Full force as much as I could, just as a volunteer, and I decided to push licensed open carry, as well as I wanted to start talking about constitutional carry. And I'm not here to talk a lot about gun rights, but just so we're clear on the different issues being discussed, constitutional carry would mean that if you own the gun, you can carry it, no license required. Instead of owning it and being perfectly legal gun owner, but you have to then go get this license to actually be able to carry it. So constitutional carry, or cardless carry, if you want to call it that. Started talking about that in 2013, but at that time, Texas was so far behind. We were many steps behind even filing a bill for that. 2013, I showed up to the Capitol alone with a handful of other people, not many. A few other faithful people. We showed up. The bill still died. It just wasn't enough. And my lesson that year was you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. You have to network with others. You got to know the process. You have to have enough people who are willing to show up and pay the price of activism, put in the time, put in the work to get the job done. And for every issue, it's going to be a different amount of time that's necessary, different number of people, but you have to have enough people showing up when it matters. And we'll go through that. So 2013, all those gun bills died again. 2013 to 2015, we organized. We had all these open carry walks all across Texas. And the great thing about those was they kept the issue alive. People were interested, people were engaged, and they were pushing the issue. It was in the media, and the legislators realized they had to do something. And so they did. 2015 came, and even though by that time we were pushing for the cardless carry, they decided, well, we have to do something. And so they went ahead and they passed licensed open carry, which just a short 2 years earlier had been this crazy radical thing to even talk about. All of a sudden that became the more popular thing because it was pushed by so many of the grassroots. And that is so key. And you'll see that as a common theme as I go throughout this training. So 2015, we got licensed open carry. 2017, we came back and pushed for constitutional carry. It made it through part of the committee process, but then ended up dying. A couple bills died in various places of the committees. But we're going to come back in 2019, and I'm so thrilled now to be working for Gun Owners of America because they see the value in not only in my working at the Capitol with the legislators to try to lobby for gun rights in the most liberty-oriented way, but also they see the value in my presenting the training so that you, the grassroots, know what's happening. So you can track the bills along with us, you can show up when it matters, and also presenting the whole training process. So whatever the liberty issues are that you care about, we can all be promoting our rights. So I'm very grateful to be able to be the Texas Director for Gun Owners of America, working on this legislative process with all of you for gun rights and to secure our essential liberties. And what I want you to know that you as one person or as a small group of people that works together on the issues that you care about, you can have a huge impact on the issues you care about if you know the process. So that having been said, let's jump on in. I am going to share with you my screen, and you should be able to track that while I go. All right. So here we are, and today's agenda tonight we'll be going through Bill Survival 101. So basically, if you were a bill and you didn't want to die, what would you have to do? And then we'll go through TLO. That is Texas Legislature Online. That is your lifeline. TLO is a website, and that may be the more tedious part of what we're going through, but that is what people consider usually the most helpful in answering all of the questions that they have about where to find information. I even had a woman a couple of weeks ago who said she'd been looking for a piece of information for a couple of years, and I showed her in the training how to easily find that within 30 seconds or a minute. So if you know how to use that website, you can get very powerful information. Then we have finding your lawyer hat. I'm going to make a guess that not many of y'all listening are attorneys. I am not an attorney, but I'll teach you how to understand how to find the law and read the law just well enough so you can understand the bills and the items that you're promoting. Because you don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to have those credentials in order to be an activist and promote liberty on the things you care about. We'll go through how to interact with legislators, how to find them, how to talk to them, how to be effective in those conversations and communicating, and talk about the kind of activist that you want to be. And then the rest of the time, we will go through committee hearings, testimony, how to get there, how to show up, all the logistics, as well as what to say in your testimony. So just going to give you a heads up here. When I'm going through the early parts, like the bill survival, the process, and all of that, you'll probably have a lot of questions about, hey, where exactly do I show up? And what does this look like? And what do I say? I have literally pictures of the committee rooms. I have maps. I have all that information, again, on the latter part of this training, all the logistics. I promise we will get to that. And if I don't answer your question, just make sure you are asking those questions in Q&A, and I will get to that. And then finally, if you sleep through all of this, I'm just going to tell you, time to wake up is on number 7, the 3 things you cannot fail to do. So that's when we'll give the recap. 3 things you cannot fail to do for any issue you care about. So let's go ahead and jump on in to Bill Survival 101. So here's a picture, I think it's an accurate picture of what I think the life of a bill is during session. You ready for it? Let's see. Whoops. There we go. That is my rendition of a life of a bill during session. It's because basically during session, a bill is only one jaw snap away from a really painful, bloody death. It's a whole lot easier to kill a bill than it is to pass it. And that's a good thing, okay? We don't want it to be the opposite. We want less government, not more government. But sometimes we have to pass bills in order to repeal things and to get less government involvement. So we got to know the process, work a little bit harder to actually pass the legislation that we care about. So what does that actually look like? Well, here's what it looks like. This is what I call Bill Survival Skills 101. If you were a bill and you didn't want to die, what would you have to do? You would have to pass in the House. You would have to pass through the Senate, and you would have to get signed by the governor. Or if there was actually a veto, then potentially there's a chance for the legislature to override the veto. But what order can that go in? Well, the governor is going to be the final step. But between the House and the Senate, you could start in either one. You could start in the House and go all the way through the House and then go through the Senate. Or you could start in the Senate and go all the way through the Senate and then go through the House. Or you could actually go through both at the same time. Now, given the fact that there's 5 short months for all these bills to get through, and there were over 6,000 bills filed last time, and there are deadlines throughout session of, hey, if you haven't reached this point by a certain time, it's effectively dead. So given all of that, it's a whole lot more effective And it's much better to have bills filed in both the House and the Senate going through at the same time. Those are called companion bills. So House and Senate at the same time is the most effective. But even if it's filed in only one chamber, as long as it moves through quickly and you push it through quickly, it can then get sent to the other chamber and go all the way through and still have a good chance at passing. So let's track, just for example, let's track a bill that starts in the House and then goes to the Senate, okay? Just as our example, so you understand the details of the process. So first step in the House is to be filed. Filing started a week after elections. So the next Monday after elections, I believe that was November 12th. It's called pre-filing because it's before session. Session starts on January 8th, and filing continues for another around 60 days. So filing continues through March 8th. So bills are already being filed, and they will continue to be filed until March 8th. Just to give you an idea of the volume, on the first day of filing, we saw over 400 bills filed in both the House and the Senate. That was definitely rushed for the first day, and then it slowed down a little after that. But we expect maybe around the 6,000 number we saw last time. So there will be a lot of bills filed. The next thing cannot happen until after session starts. So once again, session starts January 8th. On the first day of session, the main important thing that happens is they elect the Speaker of the House. The members cast a vote for the Speaker of the House. After that, they will select the rules, and that could be later the same day, that could be the following day, but that's the next step in the process. They set their own rules, the House rules of how they will function. And then the Speaker will then be able to line up his committee. So the Speaker will appoint committee chairs and all the committee members, and he can't do that until after session starts, after he's already been elected Speaker. So even though we do have a presumptive Speaker now, he can't make those official appointments and can't have those conversations officially until January 8th, after January 8th. So after all those beginning things happen, then the bill can continue to its next step. And again, if the bill doesn't want to die, what does it have to do? The Speaker has to assign it to a committee, and the committees are sorted by topic. For example, gun bills usually go to Homeland Security and Public Safety. Education bills, education, higher education, a lot of life bills end up going to Health and Human Services, but some will go to State Affairs. A lot of big issues go to State Affairs. There are many different committees. So they'll go to the committee sorted by topic, selected by the Speaker of the House. Now, if the Speaker decides not to refer a bill to committee, it's effectively dead. That's a must. That's a necessary step in the process according to the rules that have been set up. So that's the first choke point. But assuming it gets through that first choke point, and most bills do, then it is in the lap of the committee chair. Now, the committee chair has two ways that he can kill a bill. The committee chair must do these two things in order for the bill to stay alive and keep moving. The committee chair must schedule it for a hearing, for that public hearing, and must bring it up for a vote to get it out of the committee. So again, it's got to do both of those things. If one of those things doesn't happen, and that's a choke point where the bill gets caught up or it doesn't move fast enough, then the bill's dead. So those are two very important choke points. Now let me talk about the committees. I know in my head, before I started doing this, I figured the committees are just this private backroom thing that's part of what the House does or part of what the Senate does. Like, it's their own thing, right? Actually, that's not the case. A committee hearing is a public invitation in almost all cases. And it will be announced as a public hearing unless that's not the case. So a committee hearing is the one time for each issue that the legislature invites the entire state of Texas to come to Austin and give your opinion on that bill on public record. That's the one time, and it's a public invitation for you to come give your opinion on record. So if you care about an issue, I cannot stress highly enough how important it is for you to show up to that committee hearing. And yeah, there are going to be a lot of other things for you to do that day, and it's going to be tough. And right now, the current rules say you have to come to Austin to do it. Although we would love to be able to set different rules, and if the House would agree, you could set different rules so you could actually testify in different parts of Texas at your local district offices. But I cannot stress how important that is. Another catch is that there's usually 3-day notice for committee hearings. That's not much. So I get it. It's tough to come. But again, realize if you care about an issue, this is that one time. You may get that one chance once every 2 years. So don't underestimate the power of showing up, as many people as you possibly can, to those committee hearings. Now, suppose it makes it through the committee hearings and gets voted out of committee. Well, it's not yet done with the committee process. It then gets sent to what's called the calendars committee. And the calendars committee was set up originally just to be a scheduling mechanism. Hey, what particular day will this be heard on the floor? But as you might imagine, it's currently a gatekeeping operation. So it is set up with the current rules, again, the way the rules have been for the past several sessions. So any one member of the calendars committee can anonymously tag a bill to kill it. They can say, hey, for whatever reason, let's stop that bill. Maybe they don't want it. Maybe they're doing a favor for a buddy of theirs. Whatever the case is, they can anonymously kill that bill and nobody knows who it is who did it. That is a major choke point. It's also much more difficult for grassroots to overcome because we can't identify the person who did it. It's not done in a public setting. We can't bring in a bunch of people to testify at this because this is not a public committee, a public hearing. For people to come in and give their input. But enough of a showing at the early committee process and enough phone calls and emails are the things that can bring it through that choke point and actually get it to the floor. Now, once you get it to the floor, it has what's called second reading and third reading. And if you're wondering what happened to first reading, well, that's what it's called when the speaker referred it to a committee. That was first reading. So now we're at second reading, where there are amendments and debates, and it can take a long time sometimes. And finally, when they hash out the wording and vote on it, then if they approve it, it goes to third reading, which is typically just a ceremonial vote. And as long as they vote yes on that again, then it has now passed the House. So congratulations, that's one chamber that you've passed, and you're not dead yet. And if you're that bill and you don't want to die, you then get sent over to the Senate, which constitutes being filed. And if the Senate decides to take it up, the next step would be that the lieutenant governor would assign it to a committee. So you have a lieutenant governor in the Senate as the counterpart of the Speaker of the House. Lieutenant governor is actually a statewide elected official, so it's on the ballot in the general election, as opposed to being elected by the members from among themselves, as happens in the House. So lieutenant governor, it's his job to assign it to committee. And again, if he doesn't do that, then that bill would be dead. Assigns it to a committee, same thing. That committee chair has to bring it up for a hearing and for a vote. If he doesn't, it's dead. But assuming that they bring it up for a hearing and a vote, and in some cases, I want to note, in some cases, the hearing could be waived depending on what other hearings have already happened on the issue and depending on current rules. But this is the basic process, okay? So once it makes it through that committee process, it's out of committee, then instead of a calendars committee, it again gets sent back to the lieutenant governor's desk. So the lieutenant governor has a huge amount of control over what things will even be heard, and definitely what things will have a chance at passing in the Senate. So lieutenant governor really is key to a lot of these things. If he doesn't want things to happen, there are many ways that he can keep them from passing. But supposing he decides to schedule it for a floor vote, same process. Second reading, where they do all their debate and amendment, and third reading, and then if it passes those, it has now passed both the House and the Senate and gets sent on to the governor for a signature. If he vetoes it, if the legislature is still in session, then they have a chance to override the veto with a 2/3 vote. Now, one more thing to note here is if the House and the Senate pass two different wordings. For example, if the Senate had passed one version, then sent it to the House, and the House amended it in a particular way, then they would need to pull together what's called a conference committee. Some of the House members and some of the Senate members, and they come together and hash out the wording. And once they've both signed off on it, the House and the Senate, then it gets sent to the governor. But that also is a choke point. So if they pass two different wordings, both of them might claim, hey, we passed it and sent it on, we passed it and we sent it on. But if they can't agree, they can't come on that agreed on wording, the bill will die. And that's another major choke point where good bills have died in that process, so close to the finish line. So as you can see, there are so many steps that a bill has to get through. And this is why I say it is so much easier to kill a bill than it is to pass it. But if you know the process, you know where to show up, and you can kind of see how this process works and where the choke points are, it'll be a lot easier for you to be effective in your activism to push a bill when it needs to be pushed. So I'm going to ask Claver, do you know if we have any questions that I should answer at this point, just on the bill process that I've gone through so far?
No questions. Got some comments in the chat room, but no questions as of yet. Rachel. Just keep on going.
All
It
right.
sounds great.
Awesome. We'll keep going. And again, if you have any questions on this process or things you want to make sure I'm covering, please ask them. Be happy to answer those for you. All right. So next I want to show you a picture. And this is a picture of, you guessed it, Berlin Wall, right? When people were realizing they could get their freedom, when the wall was coming down. And I show this picture at every training because I want us to learn a couple of lessons. So there's something I've been told, and that's that after that wall came down, some of the people who had been so cruelly imprisoned for so long under that terrible regime in East Germany, I'm told that some of them said, you know what we realize now? If a few of us had decided we were going to make that wall come down, we could have done it a lot earlier. We could have gotten a few of ourselves together and armed ourselves with whatever random items we could have found because they were disarmed, right? But if we'd had the mindset, what I'm told they said is we could have busted through one of those guard stations, we could have overpowered them. There are things that we could have done if we'd been willing to pay the price, and organize and pay the price. But what was the price of them doing that? The price would have been certain death. Some of them absolutely would have been shot to death for standing up for liberty. And those following behind presumably could have gotten through and made it to liberty and preserved liberty for their posterity. But some of them absolutely would have died. That's the price. And I tell this story because I want us to learn two things. People ask me all the time, well, could we really pass constitutional carry here in Texas? Is that really possible? If everybody who asked me that question would actually show up when it mattered, we would have already passed it by now. It's really in your hands, all of you who are asking that question. Could we really do this? If you decide that you absolutely will give everything it takes to do it, and there are enough people who make that decision, then yes, it'll pass. But what's the cost now? Remember, the cost for bringing down the Berlin Wall would have been certain death for some people. But what's the cost for you to drive to Austin on 3 days' notice? At the end of the day, a little bit of time, a little bit of money. And it might feel like a lot. And I get it. It's a sacrifice, especially if you live far out. You're taking time off work, and that's a monetary sacrifice. Gas money, hotel money, meal money, taking care of kids. I get it. That's a sacrifice. But isn't that much smaller? Like, such a small price to pay compared to the certainty of some people getting shot to death for standing up for liberty? And so if we're not willing to pay that price of a little bit of time and a little bit of money now, what does that say about us? Like, what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for it to get easier? Because I don't think it's going to get any easier. Are we waiting until it's harder? Because that's kind of stupid. What does it say about us if we're not willing to pay the price of a little bit of time and little money for the things we say we care about? Does it show we don't really care about them as much? So what I'm hoping to show you today is the motivation to spend the time that it takes and the resources it takes for the things you actually care about, but also to know how to use those resources effectively in the legislature. So you can have effective activism without wasting time and money, and get things done.
Rachel,
So
I have
yes.
a question for you real quick if I can jump in. It's a process question, the last segment of your presentation dealing with the legislative process. James wants to know, so second and third readings are floor votes? You want to go over that again?
Yes, those are floor votes. That is the entire floor. And so you'll see a lot of the process is sort of aimed at weeding things out before they get to the floor. I mean, part of that you could say is practical because you don't have time to hear all of them, but a lot of it you'll see they try to prevent something from coming to the floor so they don't have to vote on it. So a lot of times you'll see legislators say, oh yeah, if that gets to the floor, sure, I'll vote for that. Well, what does that mean? That maybe they have a buddy down the hall who's going to make sure it doesn't get to the floor. So yes, most bills end up dying before they get to the floor. But yes, answer the question straight up. Second reading and third reading, those are the floor votes. The second reading is the main floor vote where they do all of the amendments and all the debate and all the talking. See that happening. Good question. Any other questions?
That's it for now. Continue, please,
Awesome.
Rachel.
Awesome. We will continue. And we're going to go straight to TLO, which is Texas Legislature Online, and that is your lifeline to making it look like you are at the Capitol all the time, when in reality, you actually live your life wherever you are, and you come to the Capitol maybe once or twice during session, more if you can, and you spend a little bit of time online finding and researching information, but you know where to find it. So that website is capital.texas.gov. Again, capital with an O, capital.texas.gov. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to show you a couple of screenshots, and then we're going to go and pull up the website live. But this is what the website looks like. And again, just as a caveat, I'm going to walk you through how to find certain things here. You don't have to memorize all of this. This video will be archived, so you can come back and look at it if you want to. But the main point here is just showing you all the information that is available, so that next time you say, hey, what committees is my member on? Or you say, I'm at the Capitol next, I'm in Austin, what's happening at the Capitol? Or somebody said there was a committee meeting today, but how can I find that information? Where can I watch it? So I want to show you that all that information is easily accessible from this website, so you can be confident in going and finding it. So this is a screenshot taken during session last time. You can see it says when the House, it says adjourned until a certain time. That means it's the next time they're going to come into session. And again, same thing for the Senate. You see on the upper right corner, it says login. That's the first thing you want to do. You want to set up your account. When you click that, it goes to a screen, whoops, that looks like this. So you click new user and you set up your account. And when you do that, use your actual email address you get on your phone. Don't use a spam email address like a lot of us do if we don't want to get the email. Because they will never spam you. They will never send you anything that you haven't specifically requested. Also, as I mentioned, sometimes there's like a 3-day notice for things. And you'll be signing up here for alerts on the bills that you really care about. So you want to see those notices as soon as possible. So you're not, 2 days late on a 3-day notice, because that's no good for anybody. So sign up for your account, and then we'll proceed. And I'm actually at this point, because we're all the way into session, it's easier to just pull it up. So Claver, you can let me know if it's not showing, but you all should be seeing my screen with the live website here now.
It looks fantastic.
Awesome. So let's see here on the left side, you see the links for the Texas House, and you could explore all those things related to the Texas House. Just a few highlights. You can see members, committees, committee meetings. Let's see, journals is a thing that records, it records all the record votes on the floor and all the proceedings that happen on the floor per day. And so that's something that's good to go look at if you say, hey, they voted on this bill on this day, what was that vote? Or what happened on this day? You can go read that, and again, you can see all the archives. Same things here for the Senate, all those links. On the middle pane here, you can see the search pane. We're going to come back and look at that in detail. On the right side, you see on the second pane down, you see the video broadcasts. And sorry, you see everything that's happening today. It's legislative activity. So video, meetings, bills that were filed today, votes that happened today, etc. So for example, let's take you into the video broadcast. Let's say we're going to look at the House video broadcasts. So if anytime during session or anytime there's a committee hearing or anything happening on the floor, you can click that button and it'll take you and show you to click on today's events. There are no upcoming events today because this is now the evening and those are done. Well, the House isn't in session. But you can see all the past broadcasts. You can see from 2001. You can click there and you can say, hey, I want to see from, let's see, 83rd session. I want to see all of the committee hearings that happened on, let's see, you can scroll all the way back. During session, March, my first committee hearing I think was March 12th, 2013 or March 13th, somewhere in there. So again, you can scroll back and I could literally go back and read through that and see my testimony in those hearings at that time from years ago. So don't be afraid of going through those and looking at those. And again, the current events, today's events would be posted right here. Same basic thing for the Senate. It looks a little different, but it's all the same information. Today's calendars, as we mentioned, the calendar is what is being listened to or considered on the House floor for the current day. So you can see those or for upcoming schedules. Meetings, you can see upcoming meetings or things happening today. Today's filed bills. Let's see what bills were filed today. Nope, 15 bills were filed today. So you can click right there. These were filed today in both the House and the Senate. So those are just some interesting links to look at. Quick links for, hey, what's happening today, right now. So feel free also to investigate. I'm not going to take you through everything on the site. I just want to hit the highlights. We're going to take a look now at this search pane. So if I wanted to search for a bill, and I know, hey, there's a certain bill number that somebody mentioned, I'm going to go look it up. Say, for example, for me, I'm going to go look up HB 357, which is our constitutional carry bill this year. So I'm going to make sure that we have the current session selected, 86, because it's the 86th legislature. R means regular session. We're not in a special session. And it begins in 2019. So we can already search that. Now, what if I wanted to go back? I could search for a bill from, the 72nd third special, well, they had 4 special sessions back in 1992. I could search for a bill in there, or all the way back to 89. But no, right now I'm going to search for a bill from upcoming session. I'm going to click bill number and then HB 357. And if you're a gun person, you'll recognize that as a great caliber, which is kind of fun to have a bill filed with that number. And again, here's the information. The bill was filed 11/14/2018. And here's the basic information about it. You can click here and view the text, the full text right over here. We're going to go back to that home page and say, okay, what if you didn't know what bill number you wanted? What I would do is go to text search. Now notice there are many different searches you can use. I use the bill search a lot if I want to say, hey, I know so-and-so filed a bill, but I can't remember exactly what it was called. I'll just go there and say, hey, look, give me all the bills that so-and-so filed during this time. But I use text search much more frequently. So I'm going to say, let's search for any bills that use the words firearm, handgun, or knife during, let's see, last legislative session. Whoops, not the special session. Let's go to 85R. Firearm, handgun, and knife. And I don't want to see all the different versions of each bill, if they were amended as they went through committees or Senate or everything. Just want to see all the bills that got introduced that had the word in them, either firearm or handgun or knife or some combination. So let's see, I'm going to click search here. And we come up with 223 matches. So 223 is a great number there. A lot of bills that included the word handgun, firearm, and knife. Not all of them actually had to do with firearms policy, but you kind of have to read them and wade through that. This over here was our knife bill. This over here was our constitutional carry bill last time, 375. So to get more information here, let's click the Texas icon, then click history. And again, boom, you got the bill page just like you saw on the other bill. Only you have a little more information here. You can see at the top it says it was left pending in committee. What does that mean? It died in committee. They had a hearing actually for this, but they did not move the bill. They did not vote the bill out of committee. There was another cardless carry bill. They did vote out of that committee, but it died in the calendars committee. So everything related to permitless carry, cardless carry died in committee last time. But you can see over here, here are the people who put their names on it. Now, when you're advocating for a bill, it is so important to when you talk to legislators, don't just say, hey, would you support this? Would you vote in favor of this? Because it's very easy for them to say, oh, sure, if it comes to the floor, I'll vote for it. Because they know what a process it is to get it there. And maybe they know for certain that they've got a buddy who's going to kill it. So they can promise you if it comes to the floor, they'll vote for it. They could promise the other person, hey, if it comes to the floor, I'll vote against it, because they know it's not coming to the floor. So what you want to ask for, to show support, you want to ask people to put their name on a bill. And this is what it looks like, literally putting their name on a bill. You can see at the top the 4 authors. Those are joint authors. That is limited to 4 people. So that is by invitation only. And they will limit that. A lot of times they won't even get to 4. They'll have just 1, maybe 2. But co-authors, that's anybody, any of the representatives can put their name on it. And they don't have to have a special invitation. A lot of times they might tell you, oh, you know what, I do that, but they haven't asked me. Well, they don't have to wait for an invitation. And if you know that, you can tell them and they realize you know process and they can't pull that over you again. So again, knowing process is really key here. So you can't get duped so much if you understand the process. So when you're advocating for a bill, ask the legislators to co-author the bill, to put their name on a bill. And then you can come over here and look and see when they did. The other thing is you can actually click the authors tab on a bill, and you can see the date they signed on. So occasionally, not on this one, but sometimes you'll have people sign on to a bill after they know for sure it's dead. So that's not particularly helpful. It's not particularly indicative of their support for the bill and wanting it to pass. It's more of a look-good thing. So check that too. And you can see over here, the first reading happened it was not referred to a committee until February 16th. So that was really late in the session. Last year, the House took forever to get started. I'm hoping for better this year, but we'll see. It had its hearing on March 28th, and then nothing more happened after that, after testimony was taken in committee. But that's what that looks like. And again, the committee it went to is Homeland Security and Public Safety, and you can click right there on that. There we go. These are the current members for the 85th legislature, again, which ends when the 86th legislature convenes on January 8th. So after January 8th, this list will look different. We'll have different members and chair, perhaps, potentially, but it's up to the speaker to make whatever assignments that he would like to make. You can see how many bills came in and out of the committee. Again, this is from last year's session. There were 201 bills assigned to the committee. Only 117 never made it out of that committee. So that gives you an idea of the choke point that we have for this. So going back though, we're going to look at the committee meetings. Clicking that link there, we get to all the committee meetings. Yay. So we can see they started meeting February 28th. So that was, over 6 weeks probably after the session began. And when you have a 5-month session, that's pretty far into session. If you think about how much time that then gives you to get through all that committee process, then send it to the next chamber and go through all of their process and then make it through and pass. So it's definitely a race to the finish. What I want to pull up here is, let's look at the hearing notice for March 28th, which we know is the constitutional carry bills, the cardless carry, and it said they will meet to consider pending business, which means they're planning probably to vote some bills out of committee, bills that they heard on a previous committee meeting, and then also to hear public testimony on these 2 bills. And you can see they give you the time and date and the place. It says E2.014. Well, that is in the capital extension. So it's E2 is a level, extension level 2. And we'll go through that later, how to get there. But that's your room number. And when it happened, typically these notices are posted 3 days in advance. Sometimes we get a little more, but not a whole lot. Now I want to show you what a hearing notice looks like. Let's see, this is what a hearing notice looks like if there are many bills being heard. So again, if it's not a huge hot button issue, then a lot of times they will hear many bills at the same time. They list them all out on the agenda, but they do not go in this order. They go in whatever order the committee chair decides, so be ready for that. Also, typically, a lot of times they will list on this document, they'll say how many minutes you have to testify. Usually it's 2 or 3 minutes to testify, and that's all. And sometimes they'll also tell you how many copies of written testimony to bring, but rule of thumb is bring 20 copies. Senate committees tend to be on the larger side sometimes, or they request more copies. And the House hearings, sometimes you can get away with 10 or 12, but bring 20 copies if you can. We'll talk later about how to submit that. But going back to this page, I'd like to show you the witness list. These are the people who showed up to testify for constitutional carry last time around. So these are the people here who testified for constitutional carry. They got up there, they showed up in person, and they spoke in support of Stickland's constitutional carry bill, HB 375, all these people here. And these are the people who showed up to testify against it. So not as many actually showed up to testify against it. And then you have the people who registered, so they showed up at the Capitol and they were there and registered their opinion for or against, but they did not actually speak. So these are the people who registered for. So you can see quite a few, that's good. Here's our list. And again, this is an example of a huge hearing. This is much, much, much bigger than normal. And these are all the people who registered against. And I'm scrolling and we're still in the H's and the K's, the L's, the M's. These are the people who showed up to register against your right to keep and bear arms. So I want you to take a note of that. Like if that many people can show up and have the motivation to show up test and register their opinion against your right to keep and bear arms? How many of y'all are going to show up and register for, in favor? So again, that is an example of.
This is a difference,
Yeah.
Rachel. There's the difference in showing up and actually testifying, but you can show up in person and you can register for or against the particular bills that are being heard by committee that day, correct?
Yes. So you show up and you register your opinion, and then you say, am I going to also testify or I'm not going to testify?
Okay. Now, on that point, we did have a question. Let me see if I can
Sure.
scroll out here. Yeah, this is via email. Laura and Tyler, how much more effective is actually testifying than just registering your position on bills in the committee?
Much, much, much more effective. And we'll kind of go through why that is later, but it gets you the face time. It's not just about the arguments that you make. It's about the time up there. It's about the optics, about the visuals of, hey, these people are actually making these statements. They didn't just come and show up and register on their lunch break and leave. They actually stuck around. They talked. They have legitimate reasons. And it also, getting that face time with those legislators, like, they'll remember your face later. A lot of times, especially if you show up for a few of these hearings in the same committee on the same topic, they will remember your face and recognize you when they see you there, and you will be a force to be reckoned with. So much, much more effective.
And also, you answered the question that Bob had in Kerrville about providing copies of your testimony. I think you said you should be prepared to pass out a minimum of 20.
Yeah, if you have written testimony, and I'll cover that a little bit later.
Okay, great.
But yeah, you can choose to have verbal, written, or both. And yes, but yes, if you have written, try to bring 20 copies.
Okay, great, fantastic. Go right ahead.
Awesome.
It's fascinating, Rachel.
Awesome, very good. So that's basically all about how to find the information on the committee hearings here. I want to go through now. If you have any more questions or things you're wondering about committees, just go to the committee tab. You can see meetings by date, by committee, upcoming meetings, membership, committee assignments, etc. If you're a committee nerd, this is going to be your home. Okay, so let's talk about alerts before we move out of here. So let's go over to the My TLO tab, then go to alerts, and then bills. This is where you come with your bill list. And every time I do a training now that we have session started, I come up with a number. So Claver, why don't you throw me out a number of a potential bill? It could be any bill. We don't know what bill it is.
Okay, let's do 246.
246, nice even numbers. I'm going to call it nice even numbers. So this is where you'd enter what bill number you're interested in tracking, maybe one that you want to pass, maybe a bad bill that you want to kill. This is just your own personal account, your own list. Nobody else is looking at it. It's not posted anywhere. It's just for you. So bill number, I say any category. I want notifications anytime anything happens. You might get a lot of emails, so be ready for that, but I want those. I want to know when it moves at all. And then you put your comments here. And if you know what the bill is, write in whatever will help you remember. I just write nice even numbers because I don't know what bill that is. And then I'm going to click, my other window's over, I'm going to click add bill. And once the bill is added, then I'm going to click save. And now I will be getting emails all session about HB 246, about nice even numbers every time that bill moves. Or I can always, click some and remove them if I want to. So that's how you add your bills to an alert list. So this is why you do those, you register for an account first, and then you do those searches and you figure out what are the bills that you actually care about. Or maybe you get bill lists from an organization like mine, and I'll show you later. Well, teaser alert, I have my bill list actually up on gunownerstx.org. So if you want a list of bill numbers that I'm supporting and opposing, gunownerstx.org has that list there, and I'll put that link up later for you. Now, what if you realize you're tracking everything in a certain committee? There's a certain committee that's of interest to you, and you want to see whatever that committee does. Well, go to the committee notices, same thing. Check all the committees you want to hear from, and for me, I get all those alerts, as you can see, because I want to know whenever somebody meets, and I click save. And then you will get those emails. But again, you see, you are selecting what emails you want. Now, I can always come in here and uncheck this and save it. So That is all about TLO, and I hope that you've learned from that how you can find the information that you need to find, how you can be empowered to answer your own questions, honestly. Like that's kind of what it's about. And again, play on this, explore and see the things that you want to be able to find. The next thing I want to go over is how to track a bill. So we're going to skip these. Sorry, how to read a bill. So how many of you are attorneys? Probably not a lot, but you can successfully learn to read legislation. So before I jump into this, let's talk about what the Texas law looks like. So here's kind of a silly, oversimplified example that I like to give to help you understand. So let's say, for example, the legislature passes a law one year. It says nobody may ever wear a red shirt. And then, of course, they have to define what it means to wear a shirt, what a shirt is, and they have to define the color red. They have to refer you to some other section of code for what red actually is, and maybe it also includes things you didn't think were red, right? And excludes certain things. Okay, so then they go to, the next year they realize, that caused a lot of problems. Our constituents didn't like that. Well, let's fix it. Let's say that the group that hated it the most was the seniors. So let's say this shall not apply to anybody who's over 65. And the next year they realize, the school children they want to wear red, and our schools don't like this. So the next they say this shall not apply to anybody who's under the age of 18, who is also currently enrolled in a school, as long as they're on the premises of a school or, en route to the school. And then they say,
and red must be a mandatory school color or something like that.
Exactly. They add that as an amendment later on when they realize that's necessary. You're tracking right with this. You were totally tracking with this. And they come back and they say it also shall not apply if you are also wearing, boots, but then that only is applicable for a long sleeve shirt, not a short sleeve. And they come back and add a few things. This shall not apply. There's an exception or defense to prosecution if you actually had a permit, but you had to pay this much for a permit. But if you're in these special groups of people, you don't have to pay as much for a permit. And then they add this great new. See, you love this, right? This is so Texas law. And they add a phrase later that says that none of this shall apply to anyone in the state of Texas. So that is an example of why you have to read all the way to the end of law to understand what it actually says, right?
You were being facetious there, right? You don't have an anecdotal and actual example of where the law at the very end, everybody's in Texas exempt for this anyway.
Yeah, that was, again, I said, a little silly, oversimplified, but that kind of hopefully exemplifies why.
It sounded too real. It sounded too believable. Those guys would actually do that. They would.
It is a little too, actually, okay, so there is a gun law in Texas where it literally says that churches are a gun-free zone. And so a lot of people, and like that still is in law, that phrase that says churches are a gun-free zone. But then if you keep on reading all the way to the end, past a bunch of other stuff, it says that shall not apply, it's basically it shall not apply unless it's posted 30.6 or 30.7. Well, we already know that 30.6 and 30.7 means you can't carry. So basically they could have just repealed it, but they didn't repeal it. So yes, that actually does happen.
I want the actual language. This shall not apply to any citizen in Texas.
Not yet, but hey, just it could happen.
Daniel says it sounds too real as well.
I know, right? So anyway, so if all that feels too complicated and you don't want to actually read a bill, I didn't actually go through read bills until a couple years after I'd been involved in this process. So you can be effective without doing that if you have friends and other organizations who will do it, but it's really, it is accessible to read it. I want you to know that you can do it. Even if it feels a little over your head, you can do this. So here's Rachel's remedies for dissecting legislation. This is not necessarily the end all, the best way to do it, but this is what works.
One thing, Rachel, getting back to understanding and reading the bills, I think some of the participants would be surprised at how simple some of the bills are, that they don't look like Obamacare. They're not 2,500 pages long. Some of them are 1 or 2 or 3 pages long, and you can get your head around it. It's not, reading War and Peace.
Yes. Yeah. So some of them definitely are very manageable. You still have to know the process. So this is the process I go through for any bill, whether it's a long 20-page bill or if it's a 2-paragraph bill. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scan the bill. Now I'm going to pull you right back into TLO because let's see, we're going to go to HB 357, the constitutional carry bill from last time around. Just so you know, this is definitely one of the longer bills, but I want to show you. Whoops, well, that works too. Let's go to the text. So again, from that front bill page, you can click any of these tabs at the top and go to, whoops, this is not, I'm an 80, nope, 80, 85 are HB 375. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, here we go. I'm going to click so again, the text tab over here, and you can see the PDF or the Word or online. I'm just going to click online, and again, this is definitely a long bill, but I want you to see how you can break it down into sections. Bills are always separated by sections. So this one has like 18 sections, but some bills might have 2 main sections. It might literally be just this much. So take it section by section. The more sections it has, the longer it takes, but it's the same process per section. So here's what I do. I take it section by section, and for each section, I'm not even going to read what the bill says. I'm literally just going to jot down what section of code is being dealt with. So section 1 just has the title, so ignore that. Section 2 starts by saying this. Section 4602 Penal Code is amended by amending subsection A to read as follows. Now, I don't care about anything else. I'm just going to write down on my little notepad, I'm going to say Penal Code 4602A. That's it. Okay, and I scroll down to the next section. I'm going to write down over here, Penal Code 4603 E1 E2. I'm just going to ignore all the rest of what it says. Over here, I'm going to write down, this is just a title, so ignore that, 46035 A, A1, A2, A3, B, and F, and move on. And eventually it gets to some items that aren't penal codes. So for example, local government code 229001B, again, just mark down that number and continue on. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, again, for every section of code. And then I'm going to go and actually read that section of code, because you got to know what the law says now before you know what the amendment means. So to do that, I'm going to just pull up a search window. I'm going to say Penal Code 4602. And just do a search there. And you should still be able to see my screen. And I'm going to click the .gov site here. Okie doke, so it starts out with 4601 definitions, and I can just do a Control F to get 46.02, and there we go. So let's read through this a little bit. And again, if this feels like a little too much more than you want, no worries, hang on, a couple minutes, we're going to be done with this, and you can continue on. But it really is approachable. Like, you really can wrap your head around this. So it starts by saying, a person commits an offense if the person. What does that mean? That means this thing here is against the law. Okay, what thing here is against the law? Well, it says, and again, this is like diagramming a sentence, and not to bring back, dredge up memories of grade school or whatever, but look for your subject, look for your verb. Who's doing what, and what's the object, okay? So, intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, let's ignore that for a minute, carries. Okay, it's against the law if a person carries on or about his or her person a handgun or club. So the bones of this says it's against the law to carry a handgun or club. And then once you get that, you add the other words. Okay, intentionally, recklessly, or knowingly or recklessly carries, and then on or about his or her person. And then you keep reading, it says, and if you're not on your own premises under your control, in your car, in your motor vehicle, or directly en route to, etc. And it goes on to add a few other things as well, other places that you can carry. So that's what that law says. Essentially, that's a ban on carrying handguns, and that's been in place effectively in Texas law since around 1870. A lot of racist roots there that we could go through another day, but that's been on the books for a long time. That's a ban on carrying handguns. Well, what if we want cardless carry? We don't want to have a permit to carry, because again, as you can imagine, what the law says is far down later. It says, oh, this shall not apply to somebody who has a permit to carry. right? And it shall not apply to somebody who this and shall not apply to somebody who that. But that law, that handgun ban is still on the books. So let's now go back to our bill and let's see what this bill does. And again, this is a bill from during last session, before we repealed the law on illegal knives. So the section of law we just read used to say it's against the law to carry a handgun, illegal knife, or club. We repealed illegal knife last time. Whoops, keep going to the wrong window. Here we go. This one over here, you can see it strikes the word handgun. So what would that mean? It then would not be against the law in this code to carry a handgun. What does that give us? Basically, cardless carry. Now, the bill is long because law is complicated, and there are a lot of other places where we have to address it. So it goes through and addresses different sections of this. But that essentially is how I would read a bill. Go through and figure out what places of code are affected, read that code to see what it says, and then come back and see what words are stricken, and they'll have a line through them, or what words are added. That's the underlines. Everything else in the bill is just quoting existing law. So most of this is just quoting existing law, but then adding or switching out some words. So that is my method for wading through how to actually read a bill. Take really good notes also when you do that, because you don't want to have to do this more than once, trust me. So also, if you don't have time to do that, or if you want, kind of a second opinion, say, hey, what are other people saying about this? You can go to that text page. Some bills have a fiscal note about the fiscal impact statement. Some will have an actual analysis. This one doesn't. Again, take those for what they are. It's somebody else's trying to be unbiased, but nobody's completely unbiased. The other things you can do, you can call the author. We'll pull this page back up here. You can call the author and ask for their one-pager. I do this all the time because I want to know what they're saying about the bill, what they really care about, what they're promoting. And again, this is what they've decided to promote. It may not be the whole entire issue, but it will be their one-pager, or check with issue organizations such as my own. So GOA, I have been putting out for GOA fact sheets, and I will continue to put those out during session. And again, those are available on gunownerstx.org. Not only the bill list, but bullet points on, hey, this is what this bill does. So for whatever issue you care about, connect with somebody who is working on those bills. But then also make sure you're fact checking, because again, any organization will put out what they want you to know, and many like me will strive very hard to make sure it's very factual and objective. But at the end of the day, if you really 100% want to get to the bottom of a bill, you're going to have to read it for yourself as much as you can. So hopefully that helps you wrap your head around that. And I'm going to ask Claver, are there any questions about that? Or is everybody's eyes glazed over now, or where are we at?
No, it's fascinating. I'm learning things that I never even considered, Rachel. It's fantastic. James did have a question. He seems to be very intent about showing up at the Pink Dome and testifying. Awesome. How do you register when you testify? Can you do it online, or do you have to be there in person and put your name on a sheet of paper?
Currently, you have to be there in person at the Capitol, and I will be getting to all the logistics of that later on when I talk about committee hearings. So I am super excited that you are already asking the right questions, and we'll be addressing that. Are there any other questions?
No, carry on.
Awesome. We will carry on. So interacting with legislators. First of all, you got to find them. So I use the website texastribune.org/directory. I find this to be one of the best sources of extensive information on the legislators. So I will pull that up for you and show that to you. Again, texastribune.org/directory is where I'm headed. So again, state officials, but then you can click on Texas House, Texas Senate, or even U.S. Congress. We're going to click on the Texas House, and we're going to scroll down. I'm just going to pick somebody randomly. I'll pick Representative Bell, so you can see the person's name, and you can see their district.
Nobody lose their dinner just because you picked Cecil Bell. Lose your dinner. Okay?
Right? Okay. And lives in Magnolia and has an R by their name. And again, you can see the R's and D's. One thing I'll note is if you look up so the TLO website does have listings of members. They do not list party association, which is important for some people just as far as background research. And they also do not list nearly as much information and not nearly as clear. So this is why I like this. So again, let's click this random pick, and we've got a picture there so you can see what do they actually look like, especially if you're going to.
Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, don't lose your dinner.
Okay, there. You can click on the district. You can see what does the district look like. That's the shape of the district. There are a lot of very weird shaped districts, so it's just kind of around the woodlands, but not actually in the woodlands in the Houston area. You can see the map. There, you can see all the counties, the zip codes, the school districts, the precincts. You can see all the election history. A lot of information is available there. Again, scroll down here, you can see the email, the websites, the Twitter, the Facebook. Like, all this is great for engaging. If this is your rep, you want to engage with them on social media. You can start tagging them. You can follow their Facebook page and start commenting on there. Thank them for something they did that you like. Ask them what their position on is something. Ask them, when are you going to take action on this item that I care about, or why didn't you, or I'm disappointed in this vote. So both ways, it goes both ways. Tell them what you like, ask them to do the things that you want them to do. You can see the Capitol office phone number and the room number, the office number. Scroll down, you can see the desk they're assigned to sit at. So if you are watching the video feed, you can look at the map and see where they're supposed to be sitting. Then you can look at the video and say, hey, are they actually there? Are they actually the one who are casting their vote, or is somebody else reaching over and casting it for them? You can watch all of this stuff. You can see what committees they're on. You can see who their staffers are. Quick note that right now, a lot of the staffers are in flux. They're moving around because we're gearing up for session. So hopefully in the next month or so, all of these will be finalized and show up correctly there. But again, there's so much information available here to do background research on a representative or on a senator. So I encourage you to make use of that. Now let's go ahead and head back to my slide. So you find them. Well, what are you going to do? There we go. Okay, so they have a cap. What are you going to do to actually meet with them or have an influence? So several different things. They have a Capitol office. So if you're ever in Austin, definitely go to the Capitol office. They might not necessarily be there, but you can meet their staff. But if you're not in Austin, get to know the people at the district office. There's at least a district director, sometimes other staff members who are there. And you can also ask for a meeting with your representative at the district office, in district. Especially right now, they're going to be much more likely to be in district. It's hard to get a meeting in Austin now. They're in district with their families. It's easier to get a constituent meeting in the district at this time. So make note of that. Whenever they're at a local town hall or a club meeting, try to show up for that and try to be the one that raises your hand and asks the questions. Now, I'm not the kind of person who does trick questions because I'm not looking to trip them up. I want to know their honest answer when I ask them an honest question. So I'm going to ask straight up, will you commit to putting your name on constitutional carry? Or what are your thoughts on constitutional carry? Or whatever other issue you care about, ask him straight up about that issue and try to get the FaceTime with him. That FaceTime is so important. I was recently meeting with a legislator who I had not met with before, but he recognized me simply from the fact that I had actually raised my hand at a meeting 4 years ago and asked a question, and I've also showed up and asked and provided committee testimony in his committee a number of times. And again, never had that personal meeting with him, but he remembered me from those times because of that FaceTime. And I guarantee if I had just called his office 500 times, he would not know who I was because I would have only interacted with staff. So you see the difference there between making all those phone calls and actually just showing up a few times and being the one to testify or ask the question. I also guarantee you he probably would have not remembered me if I had just been sitting in the committee room. He remembered me because I was the one who asked the question at the town hall. I was the one who testified in the hearing, and I said some things that apparently he found interesting. So take note of that. That is how you get the meetings. That is how you get the recognition and the influence and have the conversations that are important. But also, if you call and ask for a meeting with representatives and they say, well, he's busy, but I can have you meet with the chief of staff or the legislative director, say yes to that. The staff members are the ones who read the bills and make recommendations. They're the ones who handle a lot of the research. And so if you have information on an issue, you have stories or facts that might sway their mind or help them out on an issue, you want to be talking to staff with about those issues. So definitely never reject them if they offer you a staff meeting instead of meeting with your legislator. And then effectiveness levels, and I think this will answer some questions that a lot of people have. This is my list of least effective to most effective. So I say emails, calls, and letters kind of lumped together. Those are together the least effective. Now, notice I am not saying ineffective. Ineffective is doing nothing. Okay, so we're quite a few steps up from that. But the least effective is just the email, call, and letter because, like I mentioned, you talk to staff, and no matter how much you have the conversations over emails and letters, you just end up being a number on a list. Now, that's not a bad thing. Because here's what happens. When the legislators go to take a vote or go to a committee hearing on an issue, their staffers will give them the list. They'll say, hey, 5 people called in on this issue, and 3 of them were for it and 2 of them were against it. Or they'll say, 20 people called in and 18 were for it and 2 were against it. So you might want to consider being for it, or, down the list. Don't just take it for granted that, my representative is good, I'm sure he'll vote the right way on this one. Go ahead and make that phone call so you can be the numbers on their list. They can have that backing and say, you know what, I believe in this, but also my constituents want it. I was very discouraged. I was talking with the legislator's office, and they said, our district really didn't seem to be that interested in constitutional carry last time. I think we had maybe 4 people call us about it the whole entire session. But you know what the thing is? I know a lot more than 4 people in the district who I know were very interested in it. They just apparently never went to the effort to pick up the phone and make that phone call. So definitely you want to do that. But if you want to be more effective, also, then you're going to need to pick up the phone and ask for the meeting with staff, ask for a meeting with your representative, or the most effective thing you can do, I believe, is to show up and testify. And that's because that is your opportunity. That's the time when you are invited to give your opinion on record on that issue for the Texas legislature. So don't miss that opportunity. I want you to understand the huge value and effectiveness in showing up to testify on issues on the record at a committee hearing. So if you have any questions on that, type them in the comments and I will get to those. I have a question for you now, and this is a rhetorical question, a question for thought. What kind of a person are you? Or what kind of a person do you want to be? What kind of a person do you want to raise your kids to be? Or what kind of a person do you want them to see you being? And then I'm also going to ask, does politics change any of that? Or should politics change any of that? And I'm going to submit to you that I believe there's a really clear path to being the kind of activist, to being the kind of person in politics who stands up bold and strong for what you believe in. You're going to speak that truth, and you're not going to back down an inch. And if they come up to you and they say, oh, you know what, you're hurting our feelings, or we don't like that, that's uncomfortable, or they say, why can't you just be reasonable? Let's talk about reasonable gun legislation. You're going to say, no, I believe that reasonable gun legislation is getting rid of these regulations, and so I'm going to keep talking about that. I'm going to keep pushing the issues I believe in, even if everybody else thinks it's too radical to talk about and too scary to talk about. I'm going to keep on talking about those things that I believe are true. And that's the kind of activist that I'm going to be. I'm going to be bold in speaking the truth. And when I do that, I'm going to do it with professionalism, and I'm going to do it with grace, and I'm going to do it with class, because we believe in speaking the truth in love. And so there is no need to start making anything personal. There's no need to start having personal attacks. There's no need to single out a person for things that are beside the point of the issue that we care about, because we are going to be the kind of activist that focuses on that issue that we care about and not let ourselves get distracted. Now, if you're in politics for very long at all, you're probably going to feel a pull to either one side or the other, depending on exactly what your sphere is. So there's one side of making things personal, and that's the side where you start hanging out with the representative or the legislator or their staff, and you become friends, and you maybe start attending social events together, and then you realize that that would be a really tough vote for this guy to make. Or this legislator over here, I think her donors are going to be upset if she does that, and leadership might not be happy with her if she takes a stand, and maybe I should just give her a free pass on this, because that's kind of tough. I don't want to push her too far. I don't want to make this guy do this thing, because I care about him. We're friends now. Well, what are you doing when you do that? You just made it personal with a personal relationship and friendship, and now you're giving somebody a free pass on something that you never would have, because you would have considered that violating what you believed in. See what you're doing? You're backing down the issue because you got personally involved and personally invested on that side. So don't do that. But because you water down your effectivism, you don't want to be that kind of person. You don't want to be the kind of person who backs down from what you believe in. But there's the other side also of making it personal. You're there, you're preaching the truth, you're speaking out, and they don't listen, or they treat you in a condescending manner, and maybe they start attacking you personally and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you haven't done this, and whatever else, you have an ugly face and something else, and they push your buttons, basically. They push your buttons. They want to make you explode and become angry and start hurling insults right back at them. And maybe they're the ones who started it. Maybe they're the ones who started that, making it personal. And you are so tempted to just attack that person personally because you have all this information against them. And you could just let it rip, right? And you could personally attack this person and just show everybody what a terrible tyrant they are. But here's the deal. If you deviate from the issues that you really care about and the things that are exactly pertinent to that, and you make it personal and you become bitter and angry, you lose your effectiveness because you just got distracted from the main point. Now, I have no problem with calling somebody out for an action they took that was wrong, or for their failure to take an action. I have no problem with you saying, so Representative so-and-so, Chairman so-and-so refuses to schedule this for a vote. He claims he doesn't care about the issue. Whatever the truth is, whatever the facts are, I have no problem with you stating those. But please, I beg you, don't make it personal on either side or the other. Don't get so invested in a personal relationship you give somebody a free pass. And don't become so angry and bitter that all you can see is that you hate this person and you're forgetting to stand up for the things you actually do believe in. So consider that as you go. I believe this is the kind of person that I want to be, that I hope you want to be. I believe this is also what makes us the most effective activists. It's being able to speak the truth in love. So please consider that in your activism. And before I move on, Claver, are there any questions that we need to go through?
No, but I do want to ask you to speak to the distinction in building a relationship versus making it personal when you're advocating or lobbying for a position, when you're getting into political activities, because we've had previous speakers that have really given us some good tips on how to get through those force fields and talk to your representative, and the importance of building a relationship. But you want it to be positive. You don't want it to be a relationship where you become a sycophant and you dilute your vision and your purpose in building a relationship in the first place, right, Rachel?
100%. Like it's tough. It's really, really tough. And that's why we get pulled easily to one side or the other. Like everybody who's been in politics has felt that pull one way or the other, or both. So how do you do it? For me, I try to find people to keep me grounded, like people I'll talk to, and sometimes I'll start saying things and they'll be like, nope, I wouldn't agree with that. And I'll realize, oh, I was just saying that because I had the conversation with somebody. I started feeling bad for them, feeling bad pushing them there. So like I'll catch myself, but it's because I have people that I talk to that I trust very much, and I'll bounce things off of them. Hey, is this compromising on the issue, or is this a good positive relationship building type thing? So having your team that can help keep you grounded, the people who aren't investing in those relationships that you are, and they have a little more of a broader perspective to say, no, you would never have said that 6 months ago. Like that's very, very critical. That's so useful. I don't think I could do politics without having those people who do keep me grounded. And then just, self-check, ask yourself, if this was somebody who I didn't care about, would I be saying the same thing?
Thanks, Rachel. Keep going, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, we're going to go to committee hearings. And this is a section where I'm covering all the logistics about committee hearings. So again, if I don't cover the questions that you had, please make sure you're asking those. So
I think
all
James is going to get all of his questions answered right.
Hopefully so. And if not, hey, we'll talk and we'll get those figured out. So committee hearings, rule number 1 is, say it with me at your computers, show up.
Show up.
Absolutely. And I guarantee you, Claver, you've probably seen this before. Everybody gets excited about right now. They're going to say, I'm going to be there. You can count on me. And they all raise their hands and say, yeah, you can count on me driving to Austin. And the night before these hearings, I get all these emails like, oh, you know what? I was going to be there, but my kids are sick, and, it's cold outside, and I don't have gas in my car, and I left my clothes at the cleaners, and also the dog ate my homework, and like everything you could think of. And here's the deal, y'all. Okay, if you text me with these things, don't make it an apology, because I want you to own up to the life decisions you're making. So if that is a necessary life decision where you realize the best thing for your life and the things you care about is to not show up to a committee hearing, then you shouldn't show up. But don't make it an excuse, okay? So I used to teach music, and my kids would come and be like, oh, I couldn't practice this week because XYZ, or I didn't have time to practice. I'd make them say out loud, I chose not to practice. I chose to do this other thing instead. And if you can own up to that, I'm choosing to stay home with my kids because I need to do that today. No judgment. But make sure that's a choice you're making, and make sure when you do that, you understand the value you're losing. Well, I'll usually reply and say, no worries. Like if they say, hey, I'm just going to make a phone call instead, I say, no worries. Just make sure about 10,000 of your other friends also make a phone call, because that's about the value you're losing. So be aware of how valuable it is and make that decision for yourself accordingly. But rule number 1 is show up. Even if you haven't done any of the other things, at least just show up. Rule number 2 is be ready for anything. As an example, I've been at committees where committee hearings that lasted 13 hours, or that lasted, started in the morning and went into the wee hours of the night, the next morning, because they just keep on going. They don't take breaks unless they have to stop to go into full session, then they come back afterwards. But they don't take lunch breaks, they don't take bathroom breaks, they don't take stretch breaks. They just keep on going. And they'll switch out themselves of who's up on the dais, but testimony continues. But so I've also been in hearings where I stepped out of the room to have a conversation or grab a little food, and I came back and they had already brought up that bill and finished it and closed it out, and I missed my chance to testify because I was gone for a few minutes. So be ready for anything. And that's why I say, bring all the things you need so you don't have to be leaving the committee room in case things come up that you wanted to address while you were
Rachel,
there.
is there a way to find out what order the bills are going to be presented when you get there or before you get there? Because as you said before, when the notice goes out of the bills that are going to be laid out on a specific day, that's not necessarily in the order that they're going to be laid out on the hearing day. Is there a way to find that out?
Correct. Okay, so I'm going to pull up our committee page here. You can see at the top right, there's a committee clerk for every committee. So the best thing you can do is call them and ask. Occasionally, they'll be able to say, well, I know that Chairman so-and-so is planning to start with this, or he, intends to do this a little bit later on the later side. But at the end of the day, no, not even the committee chair necessarily knows ahead of time. If it's a huge big deal item, usually they'll have some idea and something worked out, but not even always. But if it's little bills, it's literally like, okay, who's in the room right now? How many people are here to testify for it? If there's one person on this and 5 on the other, maybe we'll hear the one person first so they don't have to wait for the 5 or the 20 or whatever. Or maybe it's, this author's in the room now and that one's not, so we're going to do this one, or whatever the case may be. So no, there honestly, there isn't any good way. And even if you call the clerk and they say, yeah, we're planning to do this, again, be ready for anything, because maybe you show up and they decide to change it and they don't have any obligation to tell you. So it's kind of rough. You got to be ready for anything, for sure. So to help you be ready for anything, what are you going to take besides the kitchen sink? Well, I recommend you take all your electronics. So if you have a tablet, take a tablet, because that makes registration a whole lot easier. And I'm going to talk about why in a minute. You can take I always take a spare phone that doesn't have service, but I connect it to Wi-Fi and I set it up on a tripod and I use it to live stream. And I know, Flavor, a lot of y'all do this a lot of times, do a lot of live streaming, because that's a good way to get the news out. And Facebook streams are so much more watchable and commentable than just the TLO streams.
And by Texas Constitution, every citizen of Texas is a member of the media and has a right by the Public Hearings Act to video stream whatever you want to stream, whatever public hearing you go to.
Yes. And we actually had legal proceedings on that last year that came out in favor.
Our good friend Amy Hedke. Yes, you are you do not need media credentials to roam the catacombs of the Pink Dome and certainly go into committee hearings or any other public hearing, whether it's county court or city hall or school board meeting, anything like that. As a citizen of Texas, it is your birthright. That is your media credential. And you are subject as an individual to all the libel laws that are on the books, but you need no special credentials in order to act as a journalist, whether employed by a media company or as a citizen journalist. That is your birthright as a citizen. You are a member of the media.
Yes, yes, thank you. So all these reasons are why I encourage you to, yes, use that right. Share it with others who didn't come. Hopefully people will watch it and say, oh, I could do that next time. Is that all that you're doing? I could do that. It's not as scary as I thought it would be. Or like a lot of us will get riled up by what they hear. They'll say, I've got to come and say something next time. I can't just let that go. So you'll see all of that, and that's useful. So bring live streaming equipment if you can, a phone or a tablet or something. Bring something warm because it is freezing cold in those committee rooms, and yes, just bring your warmest winter coat basically, or at least a good sweater. And then what to wear. I tell people dress professionally. If you have a suit, wear a suit. It is not overdressed to wear a suit. All of them will be wearing suits, and that kind of, to me, that evens the playing field, you know? You're there, right there on their level with them. But at the same time, if you don't have a suit, you don't need to go buy one. You don't need to purchase new clothes to have the right to go testify. If all you have is jeans and a t-shirt and tennis shoes, then wear that. Because again, rule number 1 is show up. So the fact that I didn't have a suit is not a valid reason to not show up. Whatever you wear, try to make it look professional and definitely act professional. Because that is your credibility and the credibility of the whole issue.
They also wear a lot of cowboy boots up there as almost like uniform, but just because they're wearing cowboy boots, expensive cowboy boots that they probably got on a junket down to the RGV, doesn't mean that you have to wear cowboy boots. Rule number 1, just show up.
Absolutely, just show up. I love it. I like to wear relatively comfortable walking chairs. For me, that's my boots. I'll totally admit to wearing boots. But there is a fair amount of walking to get down to the hearing rooms. You can see here a diagram of the visitor parking garage, and you can Google that. You can pull it up on Google Maps, and it'll take you straight there. There are even signs to that from the interstate. It's free for the first 2 hours, and it's a max of $12 for the whole day. If it's full, you'll have to try to find street parking or some other garage and walkaways, which can be a pain. But again, try to go to the visitor parking garage first, and then you'll enter. You see my red arrow for the east entrance, but there are 4 entrances: north, south, east, west. So that bottom entrance there on my map is the south entrance. For some reason, a lot of people feel like that's the main entrance, and a lot of people who haven't come to the Capitol before think that they have to enter there. And so there tends to be a really long line at the south entrance when there might be 0 line or hardly any line at the other one. So pro tip, don't go to the south entrance. There is a metal detector at the front, but everything that's legal outside the Capitol is also legal inside the Capitol. So if you have your license to carry, you can actually open or conceal carry inside the Capitol. You just hand them your card. You actually bypass the line. So if there's a line, just skip through that line, go inside the building in the lobby, and you'll see, hey, there's a card entry. Go to the card entry, and they will actually stop the line, come over and help you through. And you bypass that whole line if you have a license to carry, even if you're not carrying a handgun. Otherwise, you go through the metal detector, but it's not like airport or courthouse, so you don't have any... you don't have to take off your shoes or belts or anything. You're fine. You can carry knives in there. So it's, again, anything legal outside is also legal inside, which is nice. Once you get there, okay, so Cleaver, you've been to the Capitol, yes?
Don't remind me.
Yeah, that was kind of a rhetorical question. Okay, so please tell me you've gotten lost at least once in the Capitol to make me feel better for the hundreds of times I've gotten lost.
Oh, yeah, especially when you're trying to find an office and you can't find, I mean, you're like looking at the number and you can't make heads nor tails what the numbers don't even make any sense. Like, why can it just have just like room 125? Why does it have to be E.Q.P.1.732?
No, it's government. It's government. It's government. So yeah, I was walking in the Capitol with the legislator and his assistant a couple years ago, like a multi-term, like he'd been there 2 or 3 terms, and he's like, yeah, I still get lost in the Capitol. So yes, it happens. So here's my rule of thumb. What you do if you're lost is you walk until you come to a rotunda, like a round thing, right? And you just walk around that rotunda until you find the right spoke. And it works for me every time. Or if I try to find a rotunda and I hit a wall, like I hit the end of the hall, we'll turn around and walk the other way till you find the rotunda. So that's my method. But anyway, once you get inside the Capitol, walk to the center rotunda, and then go to the north wing. That's the top on the diagram. and you'll take the elevators. The elevators are only in the north wing. I can't tell you how long it took me to find them my first trip there, like seriously. But they're in the north wing, and you go down to E1 or E2. That's for extension. So extension 2, they built this underground extension, which is why you go on to that. So E1, E2 is the extension level 1 or level 2, and you walk down the hall of the extension. There's this big corridor. Most of the hearing rooms come off of one side or the other of that corridor. So you can just keep on going, and the numbers will kind of gradually go up, and you'll find there's a room down there. You can walk around and find the right spoke. So that's very helpful for me. If you go, some of the offices and other rooms can be up. So there are stairs you can go up, or you can take the elevator, either way. And those can have 1E, which means level 1 on the east side, or 1N for 1 on the north side. Again, because they're the 4 quadrants of the main Capitol building before you get to the extension. So yes, numbers are confusing, but most of the hearings happen in the extension, and that is the quick guide for how to find them. Once you get there, you have to sign in. So the Senate still has paper sign-in unless they actually update it, which I haven't heard they're going to. So this is what a paper sign-in sheet looks like. The House has electronic sign-in. They have kiosks in the halls behind the hearing rooms, which is great. Or if you have your own iPad or other tablet there, you can log into the Capitol Wi-Fi. And here's the cool thing. As soon as you're in the Capitol, or even very close to it, as soon as you can pick up the Capitol Wi-Fi and log into it, you can go ahead and register. You don't have to be all the way downstairs at the hearing room. Again, for the House hearings where they have electronic registration. So either way, you'll sign in paper or electronic. And if you don't have a tablet, that's fine. You can just use the kiosk there. And this is a paper from an interim hearing, so there wasn't an actual bill. It was just a subject they were talking about, so it looks slightly different, but it's the same basic information. What was the bill? So you'll put the bill number, and if you're on the electronic kiosks, you need to know the committee name, because that's how they sort it. You select the committee name, and then you select your bill number from that. And you say, I am giving oral testimony, I'm giving written testimony. You can check one or both. Or you can say, I'm registering my position, but I'm not actually testifying. So this is literally logistically how you register in person on site to testify or give written testimony or just register your position. Now here's the deal. If you're there and you want to testify, but you're not sure you'll be able to stay long enough, go ahead and register as giving oral testimony. And if they get there, they call your name and you aren't there, they'll just change it to register your position, but not actually testifying. So that's fine. Now, this particular card is missing one important thing that during session they will have, and that's your position on the bill. For, against, or on. For and against are self-explanatory. On either means you work for a government agency and you're just there to get, like, as a resource if they have questions for you. Or for the rest of us folks, it means, there are some things I like about the bill, but there are some things I don't like. Or maybe I'm neutral on it, but I want you to consider this thing. It could be really bad if you did this, or this is the thing that could make it better. So I use that if I want to encourage them to make a bill better. I'll say, I like this part. Like, I like being able to open carry, but please take away the license requirements. So you can use that as a strategy to tell them, hey, you didn't go far enough on this. You need to go farther. And then put your contact information, and you'll have to write out your title and who you're representing. That's for lobbyists, but also if you're a grassroots person, you're authorized to represent a group, you can do that. So for example, if you're a part of a club, part of an organization, if they specifically authorize you to represent them, you can go and say, I am representing, I'm a member, I'm a president, I'm the whatever VP of membership of something, of whatever organization, I'm representing this organization. That gives you so much credibility of saying, hey, I've got all these people who agree with me and we all care about this issue together. So that's fabulous. But please make sure you actually get their authorization. If you're a precinct chair, a part of a party organization, precinct chair, county chair, state chair, any other party position, you can get your executive committee to pass, like, for example, your precinct chair, bring it up at your CC meeting and ask them to pass the resolution saying we authorize any precinct chair to testify in favor of this item whenever it comes up for a hearing, and then you are authorized to represent them. If you are not authorized to represent them, you can still mention in your testimony that you are a member of that group or mention your position, but you can't officially represent them. So make sure you see that distinction there. Here are a few pictures of what the hearing rooms look like. So here's our group of 4 people testifying. If it's a large hearing, they'll put a panel of 4 up at a time because it's just logistically faster. So they'll call 4 names, say these 4 are up right now, and these 4 people will be next. So you get a heads up of, hey, I'll be on the next panel. So you get, 4 to 8 people in advance of you. You'll know. And on the right side, you see the clerk there. So if this is the Senate, and if you have a paper card for your witness registration, you go and hand it to that clerk there. And don't wait for a break because there's not going to be a break. Just go right up in the middle of the hearing and just hand it to him because he's collecting them. If you have written testimony, also go ahead and hand it to the clerk as well. I like to hand it to them at the beginning. Sometimes they'll keep it for me, or sometimes they'll say, no, just bring it up when you testify and give it to me then, and I'll pass it out. So either way, they'll pass it out when you testify. Now, here's one of the reasons I like having both oral and written testimony. So we already went through oral testimony is so important because you get that face time, you're having the conversation. Potentially, you can give great testimony. They ask you questions, you have a conversation. Potentially, that's always a good thing. Either way, you have the face time. But I can say things like this. I can say 97.3% of mass shootings since 1950 have happened in places where guns were not allowed. And you can see the facts and the reference on my handout. And so then what are they doing? They're looking through my handout. They see all that information. So I use my handout as all my sources and my references. I use it for all the extra things I didn't have time to talk about in my testimony. So that's a very useful method of doing it. I try not to just type out my testimony word for word handed in. You can do that if you want, but I try to provide additional, make it be bullet points, make it be a little better organized for reading, and then use it for my references, put my contact information, but you can make it look like whatever you want. There is no required format for it. So this is what it looks like if there are 4 people at the front at a time. This over here is the committee room, the committee hearing room when it's full. Sometimes there are a lot of people there, and sometimes at the end of the day there aren't. And you can see, there are a lot of suits there, so it's not too dressed up to wear one. But again, wear whatever you got and show up. Rule number 1 is show up. This is what it looks like. This is actually me testifying at Homeland Security a couple years back on a smaller issue bill. That was a day they heard 10, 20 bills that afternoon, and at least 5 of them were gun related. And so I just hung out for the whole afternoon. And but this was a smaller bill, so they just had 1 person at a time. I think I was the only one to testify on 1 or 2 of the bills, and then a few others on some of the other bills. So that's what that looks like. Either way, you'll have a podium or a table. You'll have microphones. You definitely want to lean down into the microphone so that everybody in the room can hear you, and so that everybody wakes up who's listening. And also, you get picked up on the live stream so much better. So please don't be afraid to do that. Also, there should be a timer on the table or on the podium. It's a countdown of your time. So as I mentioned, you get 2 or 3 minutes to testify. Sometimes in the smaller hearings or at the beginning of session where they have more time, sometimes they won't enforce time limits. They'll just say, hey, keep it, don't talk too much, basically. But typically 2 or 3 minutes, and they'll have a countdown timer there for you. Again, expect anything. Sometimes the timer doesn't work, or it's somewhere where you can't see it, but typically that's there. Now, while you're there, there can be a lot of waiting and listening time. So especially if they take a break to go to session, or you get there early, which is definitely recommended. So while you're there, be friendly, be helpful. Don't help the other side win, but if they, hold the door for them, hand them a pencil. Be friendly. Again, this is not watering down. This is not compromising what you believe in. This is treating people like human beings, made in the image of God. Okay, so you're gonna treat people like human beings. While you're waiting, especially at the beginning before the hearing starts, try to go around and meet people. And if you're an introvert like me, that's one of the tougher things to do. Actually walk up to somebody, introduce yourself, and start a conversation. It's hard. But I find it is so useful that I break through that barrier, and I do it anyway just because it's so necessary to what we're doing. So I go, here's my trick. I go with stickers, and I'll have these bright green 2-way stickers for gun issues. And I'll go through the room, I'll say, hey, would you like a sticker? And if they're a gun person, they'll usually be like, oh, cool, yeah, I'll want one of those. And then I've identified this is one of my people. This is somebody here for my same issue. And so I'll give them a business card. Hey, and I'll ask them if they want to join my alert list so they can get alerts about things like this, and so we can keep in touch. And I'll ask for their contact information too and their card. So it's networking, right? And what if they say no? They're like, no, I'm not here for that. No harm done, right? I can take a rejection. I just walk on to the next person. That's fine. Don't take it personally. It's not a personal attack, but you've identified, is this, and you go through everybody, you figure out, you get a sense of how many people are for the issue here and how many people are against the issue. And sometimes I'll put out an SOS of, hey, we need more of our people here, and people will come, and that's good. So that's always a useful thing for me to do while I'm waiting and listening. And then preparing testimony. So again, read the bill, or at least make sure you have your head wrapped around what it does. I hate it when people get up there and they start railing against, you can't pass a bill that does this thing, but the bill doesn't even do that thing. So it's kind of like wasted effort. So please make sure you at least know what the bill is talking about. Read the agenda so you know what is being heard. But again, as we've talked about, they don't go in that order. So don't expect the order. I just like to listen. I check off the bills as they've been heard, so I kind of know where we are and how many are left. I'm like, hey, there are only 5 left and I have 4 of those. So yeah, these are going to be mine now. And then listen to what you're hearing. So if people are giving testimony before you, you can listen both to what they're saying. So if they're on your same side, they're saying the same things you were going to say, maybe you change your testimony. So, that's already, you get up there, you say, I agree with what so-and-so has said. Also, here's another point. You bring up things you didn't think you were going to be able to say. Or if somebody on the other side, makes the point that you want to respond to, maybe you'll change your testimony so you can respond to that lie or address that concern. Or you'll get a sense of, the legislators are asking a whole lot of questions about this thing. Maybe I could be able to answer that question for them because this is a thing they really care about. So try to listen to those things that are happening. And then what do you say at the beginning? Well, you got to start with some specific words. You're going to say your name, your position on what bill, and who you're representing if you are representing somebody else. So, hi, my name is Rachel Malone. I am testifying in favor of HB 357. I'm representing myself and Gun Owners of America, or whoever you're authorized to represent. Or it can be just, I'm representing myself, which is perfectly acceptable. And if you don't remember these words, they will prompt you and they'll help you because this is a required item to say. Let's go through now and talk about what are you going to say? So you have your introduction, then what are you going to say? What do you say to convince them of what you believe in? And I'm presenting this as what to say, as the 4 elements. I've got 4 elements of what to include in your testimony in the legislature, but this is the same for if you're having a private conversation with a friend, or you're having a meeting with a legislator or a staffer, or if you're testifying in city council or your commissioner's court or your school board meeting, whatever government meeting you're talking to, or giving any presentation. Here are the 4 elements that I encourage you to include in order to have the most impact in convincing somebody not just to agree with you, but to take action on the thing. So here are the 4 elements I encourage you to include every time you speak or you testify on an issue you care about. Number 1, what are we looking at here? We are looking at a brain. So number 1, you have to convince their minds. Convince their minds. How do we convince somebody's minds? Well, you give them the facts. You give them the charts, the statistics, the references, but you give them the factual information so their minds can agree with you. They can say, yes, I agree with you. This is correct. You want them to agree, okay? So convince their minds that, yes, this is logical, this is rational, this is reasonable. Here's the deal, y'all. We are reasonable people because we have reasons. We have logical reasons for the things we believe in. That's what makes us reasonable, okay? So give them the reasons. Okay, now think about this. How many people do you know who've started any kind of diet or exercise program? A lot of us, right? Okay, people generally start that because they believe it's good. They believe it's healthy. Doing this thing will make me a healthier person, right? Now, how many people actually continue through with that diet or exercise program? Yeah, come February or March, you got a lot of drop-off from New Year's resolutions, right? Or maybe even by the middle of January, you got drop-off. Is that because they changed their minds and they now realize that, oh, you know what? I thought that it was healthy to eat this way, or I thought it was healthy to exercise. Now I realize it's a lot more healthy to just sit on the couch and watch TV. No, nobody's going to say that. They didn't change their minds. But what changed? I think what changed is they didn't have an emotionally compelling reason that kept them there. So you got to convince their minds, but you also got to convince their hearts. So sometimes we can be really good at putting facts together and proving logically why something is true. But if you want people to actually take action and remember what you said, you got to put a face to it. You got to put a story to it. You got to humanize it, okay? So tell your story, tell somebody else's story, add that emotional connection, add that meaning, that emotional meaning if you want to be able to convince them and persuade them and help them remember what you said. Okay, you have to have that emotional impact. So back to the diet and exercise analogy, the people who stick with it are typically the ones who have that emotional meaning. Maybe they're getting ready to go to Marine Corps boot camp. They're motivated. Maybe they're getting ready to run a race with their sisters. Maybe, some relative just died of a heart attack and they're expecting their first grandkid and they want to be able to be there for that kid. So whatever that meaning is for them, that's what keeps them going, right? That's what keeps us going and makes us do the things we do because we care about it, okay? So give them the facts, convince their minds, but you also got to convince their hearts. Those are the first two elements. Don't forget those. In addition, I've got two more elements to add to your testimony. So what are we looking at? We're looking at concrete blocks because you need to make it concrete. So be specific. Here's the deal. I've seen people get up there and rail for the whole 2 or 3 minutes about we have to keep our kids safer. We have to do more for our kids. We have to care more about this issue. Well, you know what? People could say that on either side of the issue. They could say, because of this, we need to get rid of the gun regulations so we can be ready to defend our kids. Or they could say, I'm so scared of guns. I want to make all the laws against the guns even better. Those words could have been said by somebody on either side. And I'm sure that person knew what he meant, but he did not make it concrete. He did not make his ask specific. And we're all left just not knowing what he even wanted. So be specific when you're asking somebody to do something. Don't just say, uphold the Constitution. Now, you can say that, but also tell them what you think that means. Please uphold the Constitution by getting rid of the license requirement for us to carry a gun. There you go. Here's the last thing. The fourth element is build a ramp. So for me, if I get to a house and I walk up a couple of steps at the front door, I'm hardly going to notice it. It doesn't even mean anything. It's normal. I probably wouldn't even remember. What if I was in a wheelchair? I would notice those steps, and what's more, that would probably be an insurmountable obstacle. I just wouldn't be able to get into the house. So here's the deal. For all of us who've been living with an issue, it's kind of like we just walk up those steps without thinking. It's so easy for us to arrive at our conclusion. We forgot that there were even steps to getting there. We forgot there was a time we didn't know all this information, right? It's just so easy for us to say, well, of course we should have constitutional care. Well, of course we should do this thing. Of course this item should happen. If you don't believe it, you're just stupid. But what about somebody who hasn't done the research and had the background that we have? What you have to do, now, don't lower where you are, don't compromise on your issues, but build them a ramp. Figure out whatever their obstacle is. They can't wrap their head around how this will work, or they can't wrap their head around the financial aspect, or my constituents don't like it, or I think it's going to be scary and dangerous. Whatever that thing is that's holding them up, build them a ramp. Meet their objections. Now, you don't have to have the answer to every single question in order to present your testimony, okay? I'm not saying you have to have it all figured out, but to the extent that you can, if you know there's objection, listen to their objections and try to answer them, not just say, well, just figure it out. If you have an answer, try to do the research, give them those answers. So let's just back up to recap. You got to convince their minds, number one. Number two, you got to convince their hearts. Number three, make it concrete, be very specific. And number four, build a ramp to where you want them to be, so to help them to get there. And then delivering testimony. Have one thing you're trying to say. You can use written testimony to say all the other 10 things you want to say, or you can bring 10 friends to each say one of them, which is also great. But don't try to say 10 things in 2 minutes. You'll say none of them well. So have one thing, know it really well, and deliver it very well. Again, give them the reason they should believe it, the story, make it concrete, and build them a ramp to get there. But have that one main thing you're trying to say. Know the beginning well, because if you're not used to this, you don't like public speaking, sometimes it's hard to get started. Know the beginning really well. Know the end very well too, because again, 2 or 3 minutes, maybe the clock's ticking down, maybe you got a little bungled up, or you added something and now you're running out of time. Jump to that end so you can finish that last 10 or 15 seconds strong on your main point that you wanted to end with, and stop when it's over. Don't keep talking after the time goes off, because that's just unprofessional. But here's the main thing I want you to know. So here's the deal. For years, I've told people, you are the ones who are most qualified to make your own opinion known to the legislators, not those lobbyists. It's you. It's you who are the most qualified, so don't be afraid of it. Well, now things have changed a little bit. A few months ago, I actually became a professional lobbyist to lobby for the grassroots, to lobby for grassroots gun rights. So I'm doing all this, I'm lobbying for the same things, but I am employed to do that. But you know what? Even though it's my job to study this and my job to testify on it, I'm still going to say the same thing. You are the one most qualified to make your own opinion known to your legislators. So don't ever let anybody make you think otherwise. Don't doubt your own ability. Again, be prepared the best that you can to be a credible witness, but you are the most qualified. You're more qualified than I am to give your opinion to your legislators. All right. So let's talk about what you can do from home. I'm wrapping up here, so if you have any other questions, make sure you ask them and we'll read those out. But what can you do from home? So the times you can't actually make it to Austin, well, give moral support. If you got people there who are live streaming it, share their live streams, watch them, comment on them, say, hey, here's a fact you could answer this person with, or oh, did somebody catch this? There's so many things you can do. You can watch that. You can write down quotes from the live streams to remember later, oh, Representative so-and-so just slammed the Second Amendment. He despises gun rights. Here's what he said. Or, a golden quote from, activist so-and-so, this is great, thanks for doing this, and tag them on Facebook. Be that social media activist if you can't be there in person. And then here's the other deal. So what if you've got 10 or 15 of you in a group, okay, in the same area, and you all care about the same item, maybe 5 or 10 of you, and maybe, a couple of you really, really, really would want to go, but you just can't get off work, so you just don't go. And a couple others have the time to go, but their car's broken. And somebody else, has the car but doesn't have gas money. And the other person totally would have gone, had car, gas money, everything, but they just didn't know how to get into the Capitol or where to park and what to say. So what's wrong with that picture? What if everybody just collaborated and combined their resources? You can't go, well, here's some gas money. I'll watch your kids, or I'll help you prepare for it, and I'll loan you my tablets, and I'll loan you my car if your car is broken. And then, you can carpool, you can combine your resources. So the more you're collaborating as a network, the more you can get done. It's no good if everybody stays home, because their own separate reason, but they could have collaborated and gotten a whole car full there. So try to collaborate. And then now here's the time to wake up, because this is my final statement. If you've fallen asleep, this is the time to get back to it. And the 3 things you cannot fail to do if you care about an issue. Number 1, come to a committee hearing, or make sure enough people do. So I hope I have now convinced you of how important it is to show up to a committee hearing. That is your invitation. If you don't do it now, say, I'll do it next time. I'll say, okay, I'll see you in 2 years. And hopefully we actually have a legislature that will even consider it 2 years from now. We don't have guarantees. So please come to a hearing on the issue you care about, or make sure enough people do. Number 2, make a phone call, because like I said, so one phone call in and of itself is one of the least effective methods, but a flood of phone calls can certainly change political winds. There's an example. So at the beginning of 2015 session, newly elected Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has stated that they were going to be so pro-gun that the Senate was going to pass campus carry. But he said, I just don't think Texas just isn't ready for licensed open carry. Well, we begged to differ. And we made hundreds of phone calls at least, shut down the phone lines that day for sure, and we delivered 10 or 15,000 petitions to the doorstep. So we were ready. We came in the next day, and we were there. And a couple days later, there was another statement released publicly. Guess what it said? It said, we've come a long way, and I believe the time is right for licensed open carry in Texas. And ladies and gentlemen, I guarantee you, Texas did not change dramatically in those 2 or 3 days. What changed is everybody spoke up, and they realized where the political winds were, and they realized that, yes, we need to do this, or we're going to come under way more heat than we want to. So a flood of phone calls at the right time can change political winds. Now, how are you going to know when to show up? How are you going to know when to make the phone calls? Well, make sure you are connecting with an organization. Make sure you are getting action alerts from an organization that's tracking with your issue. So whether it's your organization, organizations like mine for gun rights, so Gun Owners of America, I am putting out alerts. Make sure you are on my alert list, please. And other issues you care about, connect with people who are tracking with those. And I'm going to give you my contact information, as well as the website gunownerstx.org, and there's a link from there where you can actually join GOA. If you find this training useful, and if you find value in the training I'm giving all across the state, I think this is I want to say 25th training I've done so far, and I have another 5 or 10 scheduled. And I have the schedule there if you want to attend a live training in person. So if you think this is valuable, join GOA. Or if you can't join at the moment, we'll at least sign up for free for our alert list. If there's anything I can do to be useful to you, there's my contact information. Reach out anytime. Feel free to text me right before a hearing and tell me why you can't come, and I'll give you the reasons to come. We can do that too. But honestly, let me know what I can do to help you with legislative process or to make change happen. And with that, that's my presentation. But Claver, what questions have we got? What else do we need to go over?
Well, I've got a few questions for you, Rachel. I've got to say, we have a few minutes left, and there are some things that I want to go over. That 3-day committee notice, is it possible to get that changed? Because it seems to me that this 3-day rule is an effort to potentially suppress public dissension on some issues, and mainly the lobbyists that are based in ATX get the lion's share of time in front of the legislators.
Not just the lobbyists, but also, all the liberal Austin people, which
that's true.
You know as well as I do. They're the ones who show up because they're closer. It's not the voice of Texas that's speaking. It's the liberals in Austin.
One of the questions that we had in the Q&A window had to deal with the calendars committee. What is its actual purpose? You touched on that earlier in your presentation. Maybe you can just briefly do that again. But I think it's important to note when it comes to the calendars committee, which is sort of the assassination squad of
Yes.
Of the Texas House of Representatives. That's certainly how Joe Strauss has used it, and Todd Hunter has publicly acknowledged that's what it is, actually boasted about it.
Yes.
But there's no public hearings as far as calendars is concerned, and the deliberations are private as well. It's certainly one of the mysterious committees. There really shouldn't be a calendars committee. It's morphed into this monstrosity of a legislative Trump wall, if you will. So maybe you can talk to those issues really quickly.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, the 3-day notice. So what we've tried to do in the past is work with the authors, the bill authors and committee chairs, if they're willing to actually get a 1 or 2 week notice for big momentous items. Like last time, I think we got 10 days at least for the constitutional carry hearing. That was huge. That was so critical, and that was very useful. So shout out for, it was actually Chairman King who helped us to do that. He also then did refuse to give that bill a vote out of the committee. So there was that also. So answer to that is sometimes just work with the committee chair and the author and know when they're requesting a hearing. Also, it's not always an insidious factor. I mean, if you had a 2-week requirement, that could actually postpone bills and say, well, now we know we're ready to hear it, but we can't schedule it until 2 weeks out, and then it's 2 weeks farther into the process. So that could result in killing bills more, but I think there's a way they could say, okay, they could definitely voluntarily give more notice if they wanted to. The other thing is, as far as calendars committee, so something we've been pushing for is fair rules. And I define fair rules as rules you want, whether it's your guy in charge or not your guy in charge. So it's not pandering to the elite ruling class, right? Or anybody who's in favor with them. So the Texas GOP, actually, the board passed a resolution last week calling for the House to pass rules where if there's any bill that has at least 75 co-authors, then it has a clear path and guaranteed path to the floor. So there's no way it can get actually killed by calendars. I'd like to see that with a lower number. If it had 20 or 30, that would also be great. But there could be also unintended consequences with that as well. So rules changes. I mean, if you want the rules to be different, please contact your legislator now and tell them on the first day of session, please vote for rules that allow bills to get to the floor without getting killed in calendars, and allow paths for these things to happen, because they're the ones who'll be voting on it.
As you mentioned in your presentation, Rachel, it can be an all-day process when you go to Austin, to the Capitol, to engage in political activism, not just necessarily testifying before a committee, but when you're going to the individual offices and talking to the chief of staffs and the legislative assistants, and perhaps even the representatives themselves. yeah, it can be quite a task. It's a walk from the parking garage, the visitors parking garage. It's a couple of blocks walk, and then up the hill to the Capitol on a hot day. You know, it can be a bit brutal, or on a cold day in the middle of February here in the state of Texas. But I want you to speak to the issue of why it's important to take the time and to endure the trouble just for those 3 minutes to speak. Because as you noted, there in the People's Republic of Travis County, Moscow and Colorado, one of these hot bills come up, especially when it comes to a cultural war issue. They fled the place out. And it is a matter of numbers. It can be 3-1, 5-1, 10-1 on an issue that is clearly addressed in the Texas GOP platform. And those that are in the majority know that this is what the majority of the people of Texas want. But in that hearing room, in that committee room, it's 4-1, 5-1 in favor of something that is the antithesis of Republican, or at least Texas Republican orthodoxy. I want you to talk about the importance of the most important thing, showing up. It's time, it's trouble. You may have to drive from a great distance. Texas is a big state. But those 3 minutes mean a lot. We do have to show up. They look at those numbers. Rachel?
Yes. So I just want to give it an example real quick, or a story. Last summer, there weren't any bills in play, but they have interim hearings on ideas. And the idea is, they'll have a hearing, discuss the idea, and they'll see how much support there is for them to push it through really quick when session starts. So they had a hearing on the red flag gun confiscation order issue. And that's a means of taking away people's firearms when there's no probable cause, or there's no crime committed, there's no medical diagnosis of mental incompetency. So they had a hearing on this in the House. They had one in the Senate. The one in the Senate was just a couple weeks after I was hired by GOA. That was my first thing on the job that I did. And so I rallied the troops to come in and to testify against the red flag issue. That was a hot button issue. We had statewide electeds who were pushing that as an issue at the time.
Right after the Santa Fe shooting, and I mean, everybody is emotionally hot, ramped up about it. You got the kids from Parkland trying to work with the kids from Santa Fe, got all that going on. It was pretty heated.
Yeah, and so we had a whole long school safety plan or proposal from Governor Abbott, and included in that was study the red flag issue. So the Senate studied it. They had their hearing, and thankfully, at that hearing, we were able to pull in 75% of the witnesses who had an opinion on red flag. They testified against red flag. So that was a good ratio, 75%. They were all wearing those bright green stickers. A lot of them were. And you could see visually the optics in the room. And we rallied, and enough people showed up that made the difference. So a few minutes, I think, after the hearing ended, Lieutenant Governor tweeted out something saying that the Senate would never pass red flag and did not agree with it. And the governor actually made some statements as well of, I can't remember the exact words, basically backing down the issue and saying we're not pushing for red flag to be passed. And then the lieutenant governor even issued an official statement within a couple hours of the hearing saying Senate is never going to pass red flag. We don't agree with it. We never have. So I can't tell you for sure, would we have had the same results if the people there had been flipped 75% in favor of red flag? But I feel pretty certain that our people showing up in the numbers had a lot to do with that very fast response. But I'm telling you, it doesn't always end up like that. It's the liberals in Austin who show up, who are motivated to. It's UT students and professors who are a few minutes away, a free bus ride away from the Capitol. They show up, and they're organized, and they're going to come. It's a lot more effort for people across the state to come, but we need you showing up. We need your voice there. I was in the Valley all week last week because I want the Valley to have a voice, and they're all committing to come up. If they can drive the 5 or 6 hours to come to Austin, you can too. So please don't underestimate the value of your coming to Austin during the committee hearing process on the issues that you care the most about.
And sometimes there are those legislators in both chambers that want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, they need to know that they have the numbers. And showing up and they can, for instance, you use the Dan Patrick example of tweeting out, with those strong numbers at that trial balloon hearing on the red flag laws, you know, he was probably waiting to make a strong pronouncement against the red flag laws, but is it politically expedient? You know, I'm holding my finger up in the air and I'm not getting any readings, my finger in the wind, and I'm not getting any readings. And all of a sudden you have this hearing and you see 75% of those that show up are against the red flag laws, standing up against further intrusion on our rights to defend ourselves. And they get this courage from somewhere. That's very important.
Yes.
So showing up like that can sometimes bolster their level of courage for them to do the right thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And like what it comes down to is you can either win an issue because you have huge high dollar donors who are giving a ton of money, right? Or, which I don't think many of us have all of that much money, right? I don't. You know, if you're a millionaire, let me know. But the other way is, yeah, I'm taking it. That's a no. Okay. So the other way is we show up with enough numbers so they know that if those same people, if they didn't do what all those people wanted, and those people were upset during election period, they could lose their election because of this issue. And like, that's what it takes. And if it's 5 or 10 people who make a phone call, that's not nearly enough momentum and effort and dedication to ensure they're going to lose their election. They know they can do whatever they want and it's going to be fine in an election. If enough people know the process, show up on 3 days notice and come to Austin and sit there all day and they're versed on the issues and they look like they're credible people and they're smart people, okay, that's enough momentum to make sure that, kill their next election, basically. And they care about this. So they will pay attention to those things. So yes, all those reasons are why people should come to hearings.
Rachel Malone's contact information is up on the screen for all of you conference attendees. And as she made mention during her presentation, she's very accessible. Anything that she can do to help you out, feel free to contact Rachel at gunownerstx.org. She's the executive director of the Texas chapter, Gun Owners of America. And we're happy that she's in this position. I just want to tell you guys, tomorrow is going to be another fantastic evening with the Texas Nationalist Movement Legislative Action Workshop, And it's going to be Teresa Beckmeyer, the Texas Freedom Caucus, and the 86th Legislature. That's going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it. Of course, after the general election on November 6th, a critical member was lost, Matt Rinaldi. We need to know about the strategies that the Freedom Caucus are going to try and apply for the 2019 legislative session. More so than anything, with the new speaker grabbing onto the gavel, their strategies are going to have enormous import. Check your emails. If you haven't signed up for Teresa as of yet, then you want to go to tnm.me/TNM Law, LAW, for Legislative Action Workshop, and sign up for Teresa for tomorrow night. Also, at the beginning of the year, on January the 3rd, we got the Big Stick. Jonathan Big Stick Stickland is scheduled for, I guess you would call it an extra additional addendum to the Legislative Action Workshop. So you want to sign up for that as well. All of the conversations that we're having during the LAW, each conference room produces a unique URL link. That's why you have to register to reserve your seat in the conference room individually. A little clutter in the inbox, but it is actually the best way to conduct this particular workshop. I want to remind you that if you've missed any of the conversations, all the videos are posted at tnm.me/TNMLAW. Feel free to lift whatever clips you want to lift, share the entire video, certainly this one tonight in preparation for the 2019 legislative session. Rachel's presentation is outstanding. I heard it was my first time watching it, and I'm highly impressed. I want to remind you that RagingElePhantsRadio.com is your Texas network. We're the rebellious voice of Texas liberty. Help us beat the censorship that we face with big tech companies, social media companies that even the TNM has had to deal with, and we have had to deal with it as well. Download the Raging Elephants Radio app, the RER app. You can find it in your app store and, of course, in Google Play. Go to RagingElePhantsRadio.com and you can sign up for our email as well. We need to get rid of the middlemen, the middle tyrants, if you will, the censors download the app or sign up for our email list. Thanks so much for your attendance tonight. Once again, thanks to the fantastic rising superstar, Rachel Malone, Gun Owners of America. And you can hear her from time to time as well on Raging Elephants Radio. I still need to try to convince her to be a contributor like Daniel is. We have to have that conversation. But thanks again to Rachel once again, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night. I'm Apostle Claver T. Kamal Imani, the Christian politician, your ultra-conservative soul brother. My enemies under the pink dome call me the purifier, and I like it. From Houston, may the Lord Jesus bless you. May the Lord Jesus bless the future independent, sovereign Republic of Texas. Good night, everyone. See you tomorrow.